Hello, my fellow Dreadites. Welcome back to the Dread Alert podcast. Today, I'm joined by a whole crew of people. We're talking about The Huntsman today, which is hitting video on demand on February 10th. I'm joined by director Kyle Kauwika Harris, actor Brent Bailey, who plays Detective Reynolds, and the executive producer, Frank J. Malinoski, who is married to the author that this movie was adapted from, Judith Sanders. I'm so excited to have everybody here. Thank you for joining me today.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Glad to be here.
Absolutely. First and foremost, this first question is for Frank and Kyle, and you can divvy up who answers first. I'm curious about the process of adapting a novel into such a tight and methodical thriller film. There wasn't a moment of screen time wasted, and there were some really creative ways of executing backstory and things like that we'll talk about later. But let's dive in with what was the process like of unpacking this novel?
Frank, you go first, man.
Yeah, well, Judith wrote this with an audience in mind, with a particular set of people. And really, when she's thinking and writing, she's talking to the screen and she's imagining actors in the roles, has pictures around her of various actors she thought would fill the role. And basically, once it was finished, I read it and I put the knives away in the kitchen. I said, let's find a screenwriter. And we happen to have a connection to Stephen Rittner. And we then had the connection to Kyle. And that's how that happened.
Well, you ended up in good hands. Kyle, you also co-wrote the script. Am I correct in saying that? Yeah. What was the process like? What was your philosophy there?
I guess, when it first came to me, it was introduced by my partner, Nick Clement. And this would have been early 2023. And he had a relationship with Stephen Rittner, and who had co-wrote it and ended up producing the film. And when it got brought to me, I was just sort of struck, I guess, by the ambiguity sort of like woven into the characters and their circumstances. I guess for me, I'm just drawn to stories where answers aren't always obvious, where the audience is asked to lean in and actively participate and interpret what they're seeing. I think the script defied the usual genre expectations of a serial killer thriller. I had never tackled that genre before, and some of my favorite films are in that space. And I'm gonna have a couple of titles for you by the end of this. But the subversion of that familiar was what hooked me. I think I knew there was something in this world and in these characters that I wanted to explore. And so that was just the first thing that was really interesting to me when it came to me. But like co-writing, he had adapted from Judith's novel. And then when it came to me to do rewrites, it was because we were already set up in Oklahoma with way productions of kind of, we've designed our productions and whatnot. And so bringing it from the Northeast and then setting it in sort of the Midwest, and that took some rewrites there. And I think in addition, what I wanted to do was there was a couple of characters that Judith already had in her novel, like Sam Miller, and they ended up being sort of a bigger red herring in the movie itself. I think I just wanted to elevate on that a little bit and just kind of misdirect, and like one of the biggest things for me was everybody's a suspect until they're not, even Reynolds. In some ways, there's little bitty ways that we can just like pepper it in where they're just like, is that the guy? Is he really secretly the bad guy here? And I like stuff like that. And so just elevating little things here and there and utilizing all the characters to the most, that we could. And and then just, trying to stay true to my own sensibilities as well. I'm a big sort of crime thrillers and mysteries and stuff like that. And, the book was already there. The foundation was all there, and it was a lot of fun to just kind of add a little bit of stuff to it. It's like improvising in music, Sometimes you're gonna go off on a little solo over here or something, It's fun stuff like that.
I think David Lynch called that room to dream.
Well, it's crazy. Okay, so you said David Lynch. When I was talking to the production designer specifically, we were talking a lot about David Lynch because of the world this sets in. So if you notice in the film, there's a lot of these sort of Lynchian, the big drapes and the curtains and stuff. It's in the hospital rooms. It's in the art studio. And so we kind of added those little things in there too. So that's kind of fun.
Oh, you're speaking my language with that. I also think you didn't spoon feed the audience anything. I found myself having to visually connect dots quite a bit, and I thought that added to the efficiency of a film that you were pacing extremely methodically. At the opening of the film, I was like, "Oh, he's taking his time with everything," but it was
More
you used your
mature.
runtime. Yeah, it was extremely efficiently used. Brent, I'm interested in your process as an actor. Did you have an approach to playing Reynolds? He is a detective, and he maybe, I don't know. I found him to be a little morally questionable at some points, but possibly having the best intentions at the same time. Did you have an approach to playing him?
What's interesting is I got brought onto this project relatively late because I was. They originally had somebody else in the Reynolds role that had to go out for scheduling reasons, and so I came in like very very last minute. So the first time I ever even read the script was on the airplane to set, and I was like, man, this is a great who done it, but mixed with so many dark undertones, and I just loved the whole feel of it. I already knew who the cast was that was attached. I'd already looked up Kyle. So I was excited just to be working with these people, and I was thrilled when I got to read the script, and it was actually really good. And then once I got there, I obviously had brought some of my own thoughts and feelings to the role, but I trusted Kyle on where he ultimately wanted Reynolds to go, because I think sometimes I would play him a little friendlier, especially in scenes with Jesse, because I was like, well, and I haven't seen the final cut of the movie, but there was this like little kind of love triangle with Jesse and Reynolds in there. And so I was like, well, she's got to like him for some reason. And so I would always try to be a little nicer. And Kyle's like, no, your guy is like stone cold. And I kind of just chalked that up to like at the beginning, he was probably a great cop. He probably wanted to do the right thing, but he got so tired of seeing things not go the way that they should that he almost turned into a little bit of a vigilante and started making things happen and kind of deciding that he was like judge, jury, and executioner. And so once I got that mindset, it was a lot easier. And then if I ever went back to being too nice again, I trusted that Kyle would rein me back into the good stereotype for that role.
You had this moment when you were leaving the hospital and somebody's approaching the crowd who's leaving. And you were like, "Get back!" And I was like, "Oh my God, I bought that! I bought that hook, line, and sinker." It was so powerful. It was a good moment. But there are so
Thank
many
you.
there's so many intense moments on this film across across characters, across scenes. What was the vibe like on set, at least where when you were on set, Brent?
It was always that's the funny thing about making movies, and I guess it's everybody has their own different approach. Between takes, Jesse and I were having a great time getting to know each other, laughing. Kyle was awesome. Everybody was just excited to be making movies. I think that like the overall morale was just like, hey, we're all so lucky to get to do this for a career. And then, obviously when the camera's rolling, we all lock in and do our jobs. But that's the wonderful thing about when you get a cast and a crew that's so good at what they do is every moment on set doesn't have to be so serious. You can have a whole lot of fun. And then that everybody's going to turn on the professionalism as soon as that camera starts rolling. So it had a really good, healthy mix of like everybody being grateful and at the same time, everybody being so good at their job that it made it easier for the entire process.
Well, I want to compliment you as a former actor myself. I want to compliment you and say that you found a way to make him a human being who thinks he's doing the right thing, not an antagonist or a supporting antagonist or anything like that. He was a real, fully formed human being, and I think that's a really solid choice and a really nuanced performance. I very much so enjoyed it.
Thank you.
Um,
I give all the credit to Kyle. It's a great direction.
Well, and I wonder, Kyle, do you have
Yeah.
a philosophy when you're working with actors? Is there a specific approach you take? Are you more laissez-faire? Are you hands-on in developing the performance? I'm curious how, because every single performance in this film is noteworthy and solid.
I don't know, man. I think my philosophy is this. I like grounded realism. I'm not really big on the kind of caricature acting. Like when actors show up and they act for me, I'm not really interested in acting. Just like be
Mm.
you and lean into sort of once we understand the character, it's like lean into the disposition and essence of the character in the most realistic way. And I feel like then you're not pushing a rock uphill on set. Sometimes when casting, I look for that in the actors. So it's like nothing against Jim Carrey; he's a great actor, but I don't think he would have fit to play Lincoln, like Garrett
Yeah,
Dillahunt's character.
yeah.
So like I don't want to be on the set and not honor their ideas, and then their ideas come across like a little more caricature or something. And it's like, I'm not really interested in that type of storytelling. But yeah, I mean, like, I think, the market of Oklahoma is still kind of small, and people don't really know that we're making movies out here. And so, to piggyback off what Brent was saying, is that, the crews here work really, really well, because it's not that they're trying to prove themselves, but they're like, look at us, we can do what they're doing over there in Hollywood, but we can do it out here, and we're going to love what we're doing. And so I feel like filmmaking here is so much fun. It's like a family unit, and we've got different crews ready to rock and roll in any different type of project, and we can handle everything from pre-production through deliverables to distributor at this point. So I'm very lucky to be able to work where I'm at and work with people I love and continue to tell stories with people also that I love and that are great.
I always say that a good director is only as good as the team of designers he assembles around him and the production team around him. And so hearing you talk about that and give credit to your community of artists, it's not lost on me. Frank, I wonder, as a producer who's enabling who's enabling some of these creative choices, you have firsthand knowledge of the novel. Of course, it was written by your wife. Do you feel like you were able to capture the true essence of that novel in a film with a 1 hour and 43-minute runtime?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think the final product, and it was, to the points that have been made, this was collaborative through the whole process. We were going back and forth in the various edits that Kyle had after we had settled with Stephen on it. And then, the actors themselves were, other than Brent having to come in late, they were providing feedback along the way. And it truly made for, what was going to be best for the cinema. There are bits and pieces that are in the book that are best in the book, and they set, various things in play, but all in the same direction, with that same concept of, you've got a serial killer who's in a coma. How do you solve this crime, right? And it was just fantastic, not only to see what the product was, but to be there for the filming and interact with folks and see them turn switches on that you wouldn't believe in terms of the acting. Truly amazing. So, yeah, I would be remiss if I said people shouldn't read the book. They absolutely should read the book.
Yeah.
In addition to the film. But it turned into a great project, and thanks to everybody who was on the team.
Well, I'll be honest, my Audible subscription renews tomorrow, so I'll be using my credit on this book. I can't wait. I have not read it yet, and the film has absolutely teed me up to want to go deeper into this world.
This whole beginning part of the book that we had to sort of crunch into the movie, and so we had to do this sort of opening title sequence to sort of time crunch, a lot of time there. So when you're approaching screenwriting or adapting something like this, taking from the novel, from Stephen's version, and then going further with it, and trying to figure out where do we begin, where does this start, and how do we give the audience some context, right, and stuff like that. So I would definitely recommend reading the book because it goes into more depth and you see a bigger scope of the world, for sure.
I thought you were really meticulous with delivering backstory and exposition in a way that wasn't bogged down for the audience. Reynolds did a bit of it in the interrogation sequence. You had just brief flashes. I was like, oh, he served in the military. And then as it unfolds, those cut-ins were paid off later in the film. It was really interesting. I wonder, was that a choice made in the edit, or was that a choice made when you were adapting the script?
I think it was in the script. I think the flashback stuff was all included in the script, and we didn't know how exactly we were going to pull it off. Being Afghanistan or whatever the location was set in, so we just did our best. We found a llama farm, right, Frank? A llama farm. It's movie magic. Yeah, it was.
I bought it.
Yeah, it was in the script.
It's always so interesting to me when I hear people with such a strong vision. They've laid it all out, not only on the page, but then in storyboards. I wonder, Frank, how much were you involved when you were on set? How much was Judith involved on set? I know she has a story credit on this as well as she should, but was it a collaborative process from the production end too?
Well, for us, because this is frankly our first foray in the film world, it was really observing more than anything and being there to see it, blossom as it did. Um, but yeah, and I have to say, Judith got along fabulously with the cast in particular, as well as a number of members of the crew, um, just because some of them were her idols, and she saw some of these people. And I would go back to our, just a shout out to our casting director, Mark Rutman, again, who we all worked with to come down with the cast that came in. And it was, just great to be there and see it, and to be behind the video as it extended. There was one spot where they were filming a scene coming out of the hospital or the rehab center. And the first time they shot it, I leaned over to Judy and Stephen and said, they need to tackle one of these protesters. The next time they shoot it, they're tackling a protester. Now, I don't know if Kyle was listening in or we were just thinking the same way, but it all came out, and it was truly a wonderful experience for us.
That moment really stuck with me. I was like, "Oh, they got a stunt in there. That was awesome," for sure. Speaking of fun things to shoot, Brent, I wonder, you have a range of things to do in this, from SWAT style scenes to interrogation style scenes to just straight dialogue scenes as well. Was there a moment or a sequence that was the most fun for you on set? Something you really enjoyed doing?
I mean, the scene and I mean, spoilers, I don't know when this comes out, when the movie comes out, but there is that interrogation scene that you're talking about. That one was a blast, because that was like my kind of meaty scene. I love Sean. I think he's fantastic. I've watched him on The Rookie forever, and obviously back to X-Men. So I was like, oh, this is going to be fantastic. I get to work with Jesse Schramm and Sean on this really good, meaty interrogation scene where I get to be a total prick. Aside from the fact that scene is literally me carrying all the weight with just a ton of dialogue. So like once I got past the nerves of that, I was like, this is going to be my favorite scene in the movie, just because, for me in particular, just because I loved how it was written, and I love how it goes, and I love how like Reynolds has the upper hand, or at least he thinks he does. And he really gets even like a small moment with Jessie when she tries to chime in. It's like, nah, zip it. So that one was fun for me, because I'm also in real life a very, mild-mannered and like kind person. So when I get to play these like really rude, arrogant, mean people, it's really fun, just because it's so different than who I am as an individual.
I remember I was having those conversations because it was a morning shoot when we started the scene, and I remember Sean came in, and we shot things out of order. And so I remember Sean came in, he was just like, Kyle, I'm having an issue with the scene. I don't know what I'm supposed to do in this scene. Reynolds is leading this scene. What am I supposed to do? I'm like, just listen, and then we did a take, and I think he said something like, I don't know. I'm not responding good enough. And I remember right before we said action, I tapped Brent on the shoulder, I think, and he looked at me. I was like, just be an asshole. Just go in and like lay down the law. Just do it. And he went in, and everything was a little louder when he opened folders and stuff like that. And it kind of got the reactions out of him, So it was a fun scene to shoot. Yeah.
That was awesome. You sat down with like such big dick energy. Forgive me for saying it, but that was what it was. You sat down at that table, and I was like, oh my God, here he comes. That's awesome. No,
that was a great sequence. Kyle. Big dick energy.
Kyle, I wonder if you had a favorite sequence. Now seeing the final project, as I'm sure you have, if I've seen it, you've seen it. Do you have a favorite sequence that you shot in this?
Yeah, I do. Sequence. Yes. So I think when I did my draft of the script, I added the SWAT team stuff in there. I just knew that, I'm from ex-military, and a lot of my stuff has sort of those types of elements in the movies. And so I thought this is always cool for audiences when they're sitting there and it gets a little bit, we've been in these sort of zoned in rooms talking and just living off emotions and tone. They needed like a way to zoom out and just kind of be physical. And so I think it was the SWAT team thing. I think those scenes are always really fun for me because they are physical, and you can spend an entire night shooting it. And I think we only had half a night, because we had to go. Then we had to move to another location to wrap out Garrett, and then we had to move out to another location at 5 a.m. to do Brent and Jesse's opening scene where the first body is found. So we shot 3 different scenes in one night, and so it was a brutal night of filming. And I remember it's the only night on set where I said a cuss word. And my second AD heard it, and she was like, "Are you okay?" And I was like, "No, I'm just really stressed." I'm like, "We just got to move. We got to move because it's it's just so much logistical things happening. A lot of people, a lot of advisors and gear, and just a lot of things." And so, but I love having that pressure and just kind of getting there and just going for it and doing it. And I'm very proud of the sequence. And then, in addition to that, that would be my most fun as far as filming during production. But in post-production, my favorite thing is I love the montage sequences a lot. That me and Corey, we worked a long time on the score and just trying to find this sort of kind of eerie vibe and score to it. And so I really loved editing sort of a lot of montage sequences, because a lot of the stuff we shot, once we get on the location, we shoot a scene and we're done with that scene. Sometimes I might ask the actor just to do something else. I could tell, like Garrett wanted to do something more, or maybe Sean had something left in him to do. And if we weren't pressured under time to move, then we'd try things. Creating these sort of montage sequences in the edit room were a lot of fun, and doing it with music. And there's the one, I think, well, that'd be a spoiler. I don't want to give spoiler alerts. But,
sure.
Those are the fun things for me. It's like taking stuff that I call it the JFK shots. You don't know where they come from, and you're shooting them on the day, and then you get in the edit room, you have all this other stuff, and you're just like, let's just try this, let's try that, and let's put the music here. Oh, there it is. You lean back and you get the goosebumps feeling, and that's when it's fun. So I love being a part of all processes of filmmaking. So, anyways,
it reminds me of the end of Halloween, where they just took whatever lead-in they had from stuff and just combined that montage at the end of the film. And that leads me to my next question. Do you have any visual influences? I know we talked about David Lynch. Any other visual influences or directors you look to for inspiration?
Yeah, I mean, obviously being a serial killer thriller in some ways that, again, defies genre expectations, I thought, well, it's not one of these movies where we're out there just people are getting slashed up left and right? So it's kind of in between moments. So how do you keep that eerie vibe consistent throughout? And I didn't want to, when I was just looking at all the films that might be comparable to it, I've always been a huge fan of Jonathan Demme. And so, like, not just Silence of the Lambs, because that's the classic go-to, right? But like The Manchurian Candidate and Something Wild. And then there's something really interesting, like in The Manchurian Candidate, and all these sort of unspoken moments where they'll shoot traditional coverage, and then the last take, he'll move the camera and have the actor look right into the lens. And I think that's just, to me, it just gets me. And right before we started filming, I saw this sort of compilation somebody made with Jonathan Demme's movies. And they were all just looking into the lens and doing this thing. And I shared it with Sam Calvin, the DP. I was like, man, let's incorporate this, because there's something interesting to me about this, because it'll add that eerie vibe to it without us saying, hey, look at us, we're eerie. It just a subtle way of doing it. And it sows like distrust in they're all suspects, and you don't know why why the audience should pay attention to this, but maybe there's something there. So I think it's a misdirect as well. But Jonathan Demme was a huge influence for me.
I caught a straight down the barrel right at a pivotal moment in the movie. I was like, oh, that's awesome. And it felt like an homage. It felt like, paying respect, but it also absolutely worked for that scene 100%. So really nice stuff. Frank, I wonder, speaking for yourself, speaking for Judith, what do you think her intentions were for this novel? What does she maybe want the audience to leave with? I think thematically we're looking at themes of guilt, of suspicion, of love, of toxic love. There are a lot of things that are happening in this. It's a thematic layer cake. Is there something that maybe you could speak for her and say what you want the audience to maybe do or think or feel after reading the novel?
Well, I think in the book that the one thing that stands out is if you look at the history, and she's done loads of research on serial killers, including watching some very disturbing real world interviews with these folks, right? Which would put Brett to shame here in terms of him thinking he's so macho there. But the point is that these people can be out there living a life and no one knows about it for such a long period of time, and they can hide in plain sight, with this, and the key is, what's driving them. So one of the things that Judy latched onto was her reading of Shakespeare and Othello, which is about extreme jealousy. Okay, and I'll just leave that there, because all of these characters have something in that regard, that could make them suspect in many ways. And so I think those two things. Again, Judith's love for research. She just dove into this and then wanted to be unique. To Kyle's point about how he shoots and how he directs the scenes. This wasn't just going to be another mystery novel. It's going to have something incredibly unique. One of her interviewers during the book promotion said, I bet Stephen King wished he had done a series with someone coming out of a coma. And now I guess there's another serial killer who's coming out of a coma in another series right out of the history here. But those were two very important things for her, and really showing the human side of all these people and how they were affected by these events. And one of the things I think that came out in the film that didn't come out as much in the movie, because it was all about the people, these individuals, was the psychology in the community. And Kyle, we had conversations about that, and maybe he'll come back to that. But the community on fire here, and then how that interacted with the police side of that was just I think truly well done.
Yeah, we added that stuff in too. I think a lot of the big protest stuff
Yeah.
became like a side thing, because it's all in like the building of your world. If the audience doesn't understand what world we're playing in, why now, and what is this world, and how does the world around the characters responding to this? If it were a small town, I think there was some research I had done where it was on these Oklahoma murders, Girl Scout murders that happened in the 70s, and after this guy got away, everybody in the town showed up to help. Like, it wasn't just like, oh, there's a police investigation, you guys stay at home with your doors locked. Everybody was walking in the fields looking for the person. Like, it was just insane how much the town came out to help, and in some ways turned against people that they thought were guilty. And so without layering that in, I wish we would spend more time, honestly, like building sort of more of a town perspective on it. Build the world around it, and then the characters feel that pressure. So yeah,
it's interesting how some of those tensions are extremely relevant today, without going too far down that rabbit hole. But how good art is always reflective and in the context of the world out of which it arises. I think you did that beautifully, without a heavy hand, and really built a nuanced world.
I just wanted to say you didn't ask me what my favorite scene was.
Yeah. What is your favorite scene? Yes.
So Judith and I didn't have the stamina of the rest of these people, right? We're older than most of them there, and so we weren't up for some of these late night shots. But I think the scene where Garrett confronts Sean, and it's just a face to face thing here. But Garrett really shone in that. Here's a guy who's coming out of a coma and slowly getting around, but he has so many good lines in that, and that dialogue in that one scene, just like, yeah, this is powerful.
I still had not pinned down the ending at that point, but my heart broke in that scene. It was one of and I will say, without spoiling it, the last shot of this film is one of the most beautiful things. it broke and restored my heart, if that makes sense. But yeah, since we're talking about favorite scenes.
It was crazy. That was the first scene we shot with Garrett too.
Really?
Yeah,
He nailed it.
We were shooting in the hospital first. The first week of filming was in the hospital stuff. And I think it was like the last day of filming it was the first day Garrett showed up on set and his first scene before he got into the wig and stuff like that. But yeah, so it was interesting that I remember him saying something to me like, yeah, I'm shooting the ending scene first.
So I'm gonna pivot to some questions that we ask everybody who comes on the podcast. And I'm gonna go through all three of you. I would love to know what your favorite mystery or serial killer movie is. It could be a thriller, it could be horror. We tend to traffic in horror movies here, but mystery or serial killer movie. Kyle, why don't we start with you?
Favorite? I don't know if it's favorite, but it sticks in my head. I'm drawn to movies that aren't just super big that says, "Hey world, come see me." I like to sort of discover things too at the same time. So there was this movie called Prisoners that came out with Hugh Jackman and Jake Gyllenhaal. Not really a serial killer film, but it had some sort of like those things in it. And that movie it's 2.5 hours long. And there should be no reason why that type of drama thriller is like that. But for whatever reason, it works. And I'm immersed in it from the beginning to the end. And I prefer like smart movies. I don't want to watch a movie that, I watch all movies, but like I want something that I can sit down and it's like a good novel. And I'm going to put forward my time into it and I'm going to get more out of it. I'm going to appreciate it more. And so like, Prisoners to me is like that movie when I think about serial killers or mystery thrillers. That was just something that didn't fly big. It flew under the radar a lot, but like it sticks with me. And I just watched The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, Fincher's movie. I just saw it last night and I hadn't seen it in many years. And I was sitting there thinking about The Huntsman afterwards. I was like, oh, wow, I could see how Fincher was thinking with the shots and stuff. And I just really thought that movie was very well done and so misleading. And the characters go off this way for a while, and they come back to the central narrative. And then it ends at one point, and this is a false ending. And then it goes on for another 20, 30 minutes chasing down this Wennerstrom character. I thought it was just so interesting to me that filmmakers have the ability to sort of try things in their storytelling, and it just doesn't have to sit within this sort of standard traditional framework. I like movies that challenge me a little bit.
Yeah, you can't go wrong with Fincher.
If you talk about horror, I guess Seven stands out from way back, right? But I have to say, after going through this, that and I'm sucking up here, the Huntsman film is probably my favorite to this point. But if
I think that's a fine choice.
If you ask me about mystery beyond that, I have to add that I'm also a fan of comedy. So Clue is one of my best favorite, whodunits out there.
Brent, how about you? You got a good mystery or serial killer film?
Listen, The Huntsman was such a great answer. That was the right answer. Good job, Frank. Seven's also fantastic. When it comes to like psychological thrillers, I love like when you don't really know what's real and what's not real. There's a movie way back, I think it was in like 2006 called Stay with Naomi Watts and Ewan McGregor, and I think Ryan Gosling's even in it. That movie, I remember at the end, it like melted my brain, and I just was like, oh my gosh, the acting was also great. I actually feel like it's a very underrated kind of like psychological thriller. So I would probably go with that. I'm always really bad at favorites because there's so much that depends on like my mood. I love just sitting down, turning on the TV and seeing what's already playing. Then I just kind of jump in. Because if I have to sit down now with current technology and pick a movie out of the like billion that are available, then I end up spending more time trying to figure out what movie to watch than I do watching the movie. So that's why I still love like, linear television.
Honestly, I watched more movies last year when we started heavily reviewing upcoming films because I had a content plan. I had to get these out. When I'm left to my own devices, I'm just going to be watching Halloween or Scream or The Blair Witch Project again. That's just my favorites.
Man, I remember I grew up in Arizona, and the Blair Witch Project was like talked about for so long because it was the biggest argument of whether it was real or not.
Real or not, yeah.
And I was
Yep.
like, oh, that was real. And I was terrified. And then eventually found out like that it was all, obviously a movie. Or like Paranormal Activity was like another one of those ones you're like, gosh, you guys did such a good job of making this feel real.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that brings me to my next question. Since we tend to be a horror first channel here, Brent, do you have a favorite horror movie?
The one that I again, another tough one, but there was a movie, I'm sure, hopefully I'm going to make this sound like it's such a small movie, but it's called It Follows.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Love it.
Oh,
Like
It
a good
Follows
film.
is so good. And then maybe one that I've watched way too many times is The Descent. It's
That was
where
good,
like,
yeah.
Top 10 movie for me too. Love it.
oh, and I get real claustrophobic, and I felt like that movie did such a good job of making me feel like I was trapped in that cave. And I love a spoiler, but this movie came out forever ago, so it's your fault. But I loved the ending where you didn't really know like if she got out or not. Like those are my
Yeah.
favorite types of movies where the audience afterward gets to have a
Thinking
conversation
about
and say, yeah,
Yeah.
like what was your interpretation? Is she out? Is she not out? Like I love those where, you go with a buddy like Kyle and afterwards you can be like, hey, what did you think? Like, what was your opinion of what happened? And it's not so spoon fed of like, this was the movie, this was the ending with a little bow on it. So that movie
Yeah.
was great.
Yeah.
We even
Totally
did that with Huntsman, too. Like at the end of it, it's like, let's just have the audience
Yeah.
think this. Is he complicit in this? It's like,
Mhm.
what do we think? And I think it's like up to the audience to think that. And I think the more they think about it, the more it stays with them, and the more they appreciate those types of movies. Versus like he gets arrested at the end of it, and then there's like words on the screen that says Lincoln Raider was arrested for murder. It's like,
Yeah.
come on. It's like,
I have major thoughts on this that we can't get into because they're spoilery, but I have major thoughts about the ending of the movie. But like I said, it broke and restored my heart all at the same time. Frank, do you have a favorite horror movie?
That's a tough question to answer. It is. I have to tell you that when I was much younger, I was exposed to The Exorcist, and it left a bad impression in my head. Right? I mean, so I avoid those things. But and I'm not the movie addict that my wife is. I've had a career in medicine, and so I don't watch as much. Right now, there's nothing that stands out for me other than some of the things that were mentioned.
Yeah. I will say, being traumatized by The Exorcist, that speaks highly of that film. That is one of the most frequent things we talk about on this podcast with authors and directors are when they saw The Exorcist, oftentimes way too young, and the lasting impression it had on them. So that is like that and The Shining is this is probably the second most referenced movie on this podcast. But yeah. Kyle, do you have a favorite horror movie?
I mean, this is, I guess, cosmic horror, but it's Alien, The Thing, Predator. Even though that's not traditional horror. I mean, like, I feel like there was a movie that scared me when I was a kid. I was probably in the late 80s. I might have been like 6 or 7. And we'd always rent VHS tapes on a Friday and watch them on the weekends. And I remember staying with my grandparents, and they were like, I rented Pet Sematary, and they were like, don't watch this one. And I was like, no, I'm going to watch it. And they all went to bed, and I stayed up by myself and I watched it. And I remember like sleeping in the bedroom floor next to their bed at night afterwards. Like it freaked me out. And it scares me, like, to this day. There's something attached in my psyche with that movie. It's weird, but yeah.
I just want to highlight one more time, Kyle, your balanced establishing shots, the symmetry that you show, it's just absolutely gorgeous. And the coloration, I could go on for hours. I love this film. I highly recommend all of you out there, check it out. Kyle, do you want to tell us where we can see this movie, when we can see this movie?
Yeah, February 6th, it's dropping on theaters throughout the United States. It's not nationwide, but it'll be in select theaters. So it's coming to LA. It's coming to like probably New York. It's coming to Oklahoma City and Tulsa. But then also on February 10th, it drops on VOD platforms pretty much everywhere for rent and purchase.
Again, thank you all for joining us. I can't thank you enough. This has been a blast. And stay spooky, my friends.